Anissa Jones won the hearts of audiences across America with her sweet and lovable portrayal of Buffy Davis on CBS's Family Affair. With her bright smile, blonde pigtails, and innocent charm, she seemed to embody the perfect all-American child star. But as Hollywood has shown time and time again, the world of young fame is often not as magical as it appears. Behind the camera, Anissa's life was far more complicated than the wholesome image she projected. Tragically, she would become yet another example of a child star whose life unraveled too soon. Born Mary Anissa Jones on March 11, 1958, in Lafayette, Indiana, she came from a family with strong Middle Eastern ties. Though she looked like the typical all-American girl, her maternal grandparents had immigrated to the United States from Lebanon. While she wasn't raised with deep connections to her Lebanese heritage, the influence of her roots was still present in small but meaningful ways. One of the most significant ways Anissa carried her heritage was through her name. Instead of using her first name, she exclusively went by her middle name, Anissa, both personally and professionally. The name, which means little friend in Arabic, would come to define her public persona as a warm and endearing child actress. However, the circumstances surrounding her very existence were already tied to controversy. Her parents, John Paul Jones and Mary Paula Tweel, had met under circumstances that might have raised a few eyebrows. Their relationship began at Purdue University, where John Paul was a faculty board member and Mary Paula was a student. Though the specifics of their courtship remain unclear, the dynamics of their relationship, particularly the power imbalance, may have attracted some unwanted attention. Whether or not they faced public scrutiny, the couple decided to leave Indiana behind and start fresh elsewhere. Shortly after the birth of their second child, John Paul Jr., the Jones family relocated across the country to Playa del Rey, California. The move would unknowingly set Anissa on a path towards stardom, but it also marked the beginning of a turbulent period in her young life. Even before her career took off, the family's struggles cast a shadow over her childhood. The Joneses' marriage quickly unraveled after their move, leading to a bitter and prolonged divorce. The split triggered a years-long custody battle over Anissa and her younger brother, a fight that took a serious emotional toll on the family. Eventually, their father won full custody of both children, but until the court finalized the ruling, Anissa remained under the care of her mother. Unfortunately, staying with her mother did little to provide stability. Rather than a source of comfort, Mary Paula's parenting would become a source of tension, shaping much of the turbulence that followed in Anissa's life. Even as she entered Hollywood's dazzling world, the fractured foundation of her early years would linger, influencing the struggles she would later face. Jones's mother, Mary, seemed to recognize her daughter's natural talent early on and wasted no time trying to shape her into a star. But rather than allowing Anissa to explore her own interests, Mary took a forceful approach, pushing her into structured training from a very young age. At just 4 years old, Anissa was enrolled in dance classes where she spent hours practicing routines instead of playing like most children her age. Mary had high expectations, and failure was not an option. Their move to California marked a turning point, not just for the family, but for Anissa's future. Living so close to Hollywood, opportunities for young actors were everywhere, and it wasn't long before Anissa caught the attention of those around her. Their new neighbors quickly took notice of the charming, bright-eyed little girl. With their exposure to the entertainment industry and awareness of Mary's relentless ambition, they suggested that she start taking Anissa to auditions for television commercials. It was advice that would change the trajectory of Anissa's life. Success came almost instantly. Anissa had a natural ability to perform, and her innocent girl-next-door charm made her a perfect fit for TV commercials. By the time she was 6 years old, She had already booked her first job, an advertisement for a popular cereal brand. Over the next 2 years, she appeared in several more commercials, proving herself to be an effortlessly charismatic young actress. But while most children would have simply enjoyed the experience, for Anissa, it was becoming more than just a fun hobby. It was quickly turning into a full-time job. Then at the age of 8, she landed the role that would change everything. A television producer saw something special in Anissa and cast her as Buffy Davis in CBS's Family Affair, a new sitcom that centered around 3 orphan children being raised by their wealthy uncle. It was a wholesome, feel-good show, one that perfectly suited Anissa's image. With her blonde pigtails, big blue eyes, and infectious smile, she seemed tailor-made for the role. But her appeal wasn't just about looks. Anissa had a rare ability to connect with audiences, making Buffy a character that viewers instantly adored. Even though she was 8 at the time, her small stature allowed her to believably play a 6-year-old, making her seem even more endearing. Almost overnight, she became one of the most beloved child stars on television. To the outside world, it seemed like a dream come true. But behind the cameras, the pressures of fame were already beginning to take their toll. Anissa was no longer just a little girl. She was a brand, a product to be marketed. And while the world fell in love with Buffy Davis, the real Anissa Jones was slowly starting to disappear. Family Affair was an instant success, and audiences fell in love with Buffy Davis. Anissa Jones, with her bright smile and signature blonde pigtails, became a favorite among viewers, winning over America's rapidly growing television audience. Her innocence and charm made her easy to adore, and seemingly overnight she became a household name. But while the show brought joy to millions, the reality behind the scenes was far more demanding. As the show's popularity skyrocketed, so did the pressure on its young star. Family Affair had a relentless production schedule, and Jones, despite her age, was expected to keep up. Filming took place year-round, leaving little room for childhood or even rest. Long hours on set often stretched into 7-day work weeks, with grueling shoots designed to meet tight network deadlines. While most kids her age were going to school and playing with friends, Jones was spending nearly every waking moment on set. But for CBS, the sacrifice was worth it. Family Affair became one of the network's biggest successes, quickly climbing the ratings to become the #1 show on television. The characters, including Buffy, Uncle Bill, and Mr. French, became beloved fixtures in American homes. With the series at its peak, CBS saw an opportunity to take things even further, and they capitalized on it in a big way. Buffy wasn't just a TV character, she was a brand. One of her most recognizable traits was her beloved on-screen doll, Mrs. Beasley. The network wasted no time in turning it into a real-life toy, releasing a replica of the doll, which quickly became the best-selling toy in the country. But the merchandising didn't stop there. Soon, there were Buffy-themed coloring books, lunch boxes, children's clothing, and even a cookbook featuring Jones on the cover. While the world saw her as a rising star, she was at heart just a little girl who loved her family more than fame. Anissa never let stardom change her most important relationship, the one she had with her younger brother Paul. He was her closest companion, often accompanying her to set. She adored him and went out of her way to make sure he never felt left out. Whenever she received gifts, she would insist that Paul get one too, and if that wasn't possible, she would simply give him hers, never wanting to enjoy something he couldn't also have. Jones's kindness wasn't just reserved for her family. She made time for everyone around her. When Family Affair lost one of its own, on-set janitor Earl Graham, she displayed an extraordinary level of compassion for someone so young. She considered Graham a close friend and wanted to honor him in a meaningful way. With her mother's help, she placed a $400 ad in Variety magazine publishing a heartfelt goodbye to him. It was a small but deeply personal tribute, showing just how much she valued those around her. Her warmth and generosity didn't go unnoticed. The cast and crew of Family Affair often spoke highly of Jones, praising both her acting skills and her kind-hearted nature. One co-star later described her as incredibly intelligent, with a natural talent for performing. She also had a way of making guest stars feel welcome on set, befriending them so they wouldn't feel like outsiders. Her ability to connect with people was undeniable, and it even landed her a role alongside one of the biggest stars of the era. In 1969, at the peak of her fame, Jones made her only feature film appearance in The Trouble with Girls, where she shared the screen with none other than Elvis Presley. While little is known about her interactions with the King, the fact that it was her sole movie credit speaks volumes. She had the potential for a promising film career, but for reasons that would soon become clear, she never pursued it further. Despite her limited work in movies, Jones remained in high demand. Between 1967 and 1971, she was a frequent guest on television talk shows, appearing on at least 5, including The Merv Griffin Show and The Dick Cavett Show. In 1967, she even took the stage at the Emmys to present an award, an impressive feat for someone so young. But as her career soared, the pressures of fame began to weigh heavily on her. What many young actors dream of, a steady, high-profile role, became something Jones started to resent. Over time, Family Affair felt less like an opportunity and more like a prison. She grew tired of playing Buffy, a character that seemed to keep her stuck in a permanent state of childhood. She found the role babyish and longed to be seen as more than just a little girl with pigtails. Whenever fans called her Buffy in public, she would gently correct them, asking to be addressed by her real name, Anissa. Her dissatisfaction didn't just stay behind the scenes. It began to show on screen. The young star, who had once been full of enthusiasm, was slowly losing her spark. And for those paying attention, it was clear that Jones was struggling with the weight of her own success. Ratings had begun to drop, and by 1971, CBS decided to pull the plug. For Jones, who was only 12 years old at the time, the news couldn't have come soon enough. She was eager to leave Buffy behind and start fresh. However, she quickly realized that shaking off the shadow of her most famous role would be far more difficult than she had imagined. Determined to reinvent herself, Jones dove into auditions, hoping to transition from television to film. But despite her talent and ambition, Hollywood refused to see her as anything other than the sweet pigtailed girl from Family Affair. Time and time again, casting directors dismissed her, unable to separate her from the character that had made her famous. Her frustration only grew when she lost out on a major opportunity. Jones auditioned for the role of Regan McNeil in The Exorcist, 1973, a part that could have completely transformed her career. Playing a young girl possessed by a demon would have been the perfect way to break away from her child star image. But director William Friedkin ultimately chose Linda Blair instead, admitting that he simply couldn't picture Buffy Davis in such a terrifying role. It wasn't the only time Jones tried, and failed, to play against type. She later auditioned for the role of Iris Easy Steensma in Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, 1976. The gritty, disturbing role of a teenage street worker was the complete opposite of Buffy, making it an ideal opportunity for Jones to prove her versatility. But once again, Hollywood couldn't see past her past. Whether it was Scorsese himself or the studio executives, someone decided that Jones wasn't right for the part. The role ultimately went to Jodie Foster, and with that, another door closed. With her acting career stalled and no clear direction for her future, Anissa Jones embraced a reckless lifestyle in her teenage years. The structure and discipline of Hollywood had once dictated every moment of her childhood, but now, with no career to keep her grounded, she leaned fully into the freedom she had long been denied. Seeking excitement wherever she could find it, she turned to shoplifting and substance use, chasing the thrill of rebellion. She attempted to hold down regular jobs, but none lasted long. Her increasingly erratic behavior, coupled with drastic mood swings, made it difficult for her to keep steady employment. Then, just as she was spiraling, tragedy struck at the worst possible time. By this point, the long custody battle between her parents had ended, with both Anissa and her brother ultimately living with their father, John Paul Jones Sr. Though their home life had been far from perfect, Anissa was much closer to her father than her mother. But on March 7, 1974, just 4 days before her 16th birthday, her world was shattered. Her father passed away from cardiovascular disease. Devastated, she refused to move back in with her mother Mary, whose controlling nature had long been a source of tension. Instead, she chose to live with a friend, creating even more distance between herself and the one parent she had left. Her refusal to return home infuriated her mother. Though Mary was still legally her guardian, Anissa wanted nothing to do with her, often disappearing for days at a time. She surrounded herself with a new group of friends, ones her mother strongly disapproved of, believing they were only encouraging her downward spiral. Unable to control her daughter, Mary frequently called the authorities, filing missing person reports whenever Anissa vanished for too long. But her warnings fell on deaf ears, and Anissa continued down a dangerous path. By the time she turned 18 on March 11, 1976, she was legally free from her mother's influence. And with that milestone came something else: access to the money she had earned during her years on Family Affair. Until then, her earnings had been locked away in a trust, but now she was handed a lump sum payment that totaled just under $200,000. For Anissa, it was a windfall. For those who knew her struggles, it was a cause for concern. Rather than using the money to secure a stable future, Anissa plunged headfirst into a world of excess. She spent lavishly, treating her friends to shopping sprees and extravagant trips. But more than anything, she used the money to fuel her already dangerous lifestyle, throwing herself deeper into partying and substance use. What should have been a fresh start quickly became a fast descent. In just 4 or 5 months, she had burned through most of her fortune, and soon her reckless spending and dangerous habits would culminate in an irreversible tragedy. On August 27, 1976, Anissa Jones, still searching for an escape from the pressures of her past, set off on what was supposed to be a carefree beachside getaway. She was accompanied by her boyfriend and a group of friends heading to Oceanside, California, for a night of partying. But what started as a night of fun would soon take a tragic turn. Substances flowed freely among the group, and Jones, who had spent the last several months indulging recklessly, joined in without hesitation. By this point, she had no real restrictions, no authority figures to hold her back, and a dwindling fortune that she spent freely on partying. The money she had earned as a beloved child actress, once meant to secure her future, was now fueling her dangerous lifestyle. But beyond the excess, one aspect of that night was especially disturbing. The group she surrounded herself with was alarmingly young. When authorities later investigated, they confirmed that the ages of those at the party ranged from just 12 to 22 years old. It wasn't just the typical crowd of reckless young adults. It was a mix of teenagers, barely more than children, engaging in a lifestyle they weren't prepared for. The atmosphere was chaotic, and no one seemed to realize or care how out of control the night was becoming. At some point, the gathering moved to the home of a 14-year-old friend's father, where the party raged on into the early morning hours. What exactly happened next remains unclear. Some accounts suggest that Jones was seen laughing and enjoying herself earlier in the night. Her boyfriend later claimed that he had checked on her at one point and thought she was fine. But whatever transpired behind closed doors, no one in that house could have imagined what they would wake up to the next day. By the morning of August 28th, the celebration had ended in the worst way possible. Jones was found unresponsive in bed, her body eerily still. The shock and panic that followed couldn't change the grim reality. Anissa Jones, once one of television's most adored child stars, had passed away. At just 18 years old, she was gone. Her death marked the final heartbreaking chapter in a life that had been shaped by the pressures of fame, the struggle for independence, and the weight of past disappointments. She had spent years trying to escape the shadow of Buffy Davis, desperate to prove she was more than just a character from a TV show. But instead of finding a new path forward, she had spiraled deeper into self-destruction. The coroner's report only made the tragedy even more devastating. Jones had died from an overdose, officially ruled accidental, but the toxicology findings painted a grim picture of her final hours. The substances in her system included a lethal combination of barbiturates, cocaine, PCP, and quaaludes. It wasn't a simple case of taking too much of one thing. It was a reckless mix, a cocktail of danger that no body, let alone one so young, could withstand. Even the coroner, who had seen countless overdose cases, was taken aback by what he found. He later described it as one of the most extreme cases he had ever encountered. The amount of drugs in Jones's body made it clear that this wasn't just a tragic mistake. It was the result of a dangerously reckless lifestyle that had spiraled out of control. Yet amid the heartbreak, there was one small consolation. She had passed in a place that held special meaning to her. Jones had always loved the ocean, and in accordance with what her family believed would have been her wishes, they held a small private service before having her remains cremated. Her ashes were scattered over the Pacific, a peaceful farewell to a young woman whose life had been anything but. But while her loved ones mourned her passing, they also stood to inherit the wealth she left behind. Despite the months of extravagant spending that had depleted much of her fortune, Jones still had a sizable estate at the time of her death. She left behind $63,000 in cash and over $100,000 in savings bonds, an amount that, when adjusted for inflation, would be worth nearly $872,000 today. But money wasn't the only thing she left behind. Among the items recovered from the scene, authorities found something that would raise serious questions. As investigators looked deeper into Anissa Jones's tragic death, one name kept resurfacing: Dr. Don Carlos Moschos, allegedly acting as her personal doctor. Feel good. Moschos had been freely supplying her with dangerous substances, writing prescriptions on demand with little to no medical justification. But Jones wasn't the only one under scrutiny. Even before her passing, authorities had already been investigating Moschos for suspicious medical practices, and now the evidence against him was piling up. As soon as the media caught wind of Moschos's potential role in Jones's overdose, reporters swarmed his office, digging into his past and uncovering shocking details. People who worked in the same building as his practice described seeing long lines outside his office, sometimes stretching down the hall. His reputation as a supplier, rather than a legitimate doctor, had been an open secret for some time. But the scale of his operation was even more staggering than expected. Investigators soon discovered that Moschos was operating at an alarming rate. A report released during his investigation revealed that he had been writing over 100 prescriptions per day, flooding the streets with dangerous substances. And he wasn't selective about who he sold to. Anyone who walked into his office with money in hand was treated like a patient, no matter their age or condition. Jones was just one of many young people caught in his web. Though only 18 at the time of her passing, she fit the typical profile of Moshos's clientele, troubled teens looking for an easy way to score drugs. When a local news team visited his office, they found it packed with young people, many around Jones's age, all waiting for their turn to receive prescriptions. But what made Moshos especially dangerous was how little effort it took to walk away with a supply of powerful substances. His operation was disturbingly simple. According to the investigative report, all Moshos required was a valid ID. With that, he would write a prescription for virtually anything a person wanted, for the shockingly low price of just $5. This made it incredibly easy for desperate teens to access lethal doses of substances they had no business using. Just 6 days after Anissa Jones's tragic death, authorities arrested Dr. Don Carlos Moshos at his office in Torrance, California. He was charged with illegally prescribing Seconal to the young actress, but his legal troubles didn't stop there. A separate undercover investigation had already been building a case against him, revealing that he had been writing prescriptions purely for profit. By the time he was taken into custody, he faced a total of 11 charges. However, despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Jones's family would never see true justice served. Though Moshos had been reckless in his medical practices, his own health was rapidly deteriorating. The aging doctor suffered from multiple ailments, including diabetes, hepatitis, and high blood pressure. His mental state was also in decline. On December 6, 1976, just months after Anissa's death, he was admitted to the hospital, where he passed away 3 weeks later. With him went any chance of a criminal conviction. But Jones's family wasn't ready to let the matter rest. Determined to hold someone accountable, her surviving relatives filed a lawsuit against Moshos's estate, seeking $400,000 in damages. However, in 1979, a court ruled that the doctor was only 30% responsible for Anissa's death. As a result, her family was awarded just $79,500. While it was a legal victory, no amount of money could undo the pain of losing her. And heartbreak was not done with the Jones family. In 1984, Mary Jones endured a loss so devastating that few could imagine. She lost her only remaining child. Anissa's beloved younger brother Paul, who had been by her side throughout her life and career, tragically followed in her footsteps. On March 15th, just days after what would have been his sister's 26th birthday, Paul overdosed. He was only 24 years old, but the sorrow surrounding family affair didn't end with the Jones siblings. Some began to speculate about a so-called curse tied to the show, as multiple cast members suffered untimely fates. In 1977, Sebastian Cabot, who played the lovable Mr. French, passed away from a stroke at 59. Then in 1997, Brian Keith, who portrayed Uncle Bill, took his own life after battling cancer and depression. Anissa Jones had her whole life ahead of her, but fame, personal hardships, and the dangers of Hollywood cut her journey tragically short. While she will always be remembered as Buffy, her story serves as a cautionary tale about the struggles faced by child stars. What do you think? Could Anissa have made a Hollywood comeback if she had lived? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.